Hello, I'm Michael Cantrell, and you are listening to the Prison Officer Podcast, a place to have a conversation about the forgotten cops that work in this country's jails, prisons, and correctional centers. A place for me to try to make sense of a career spent working inside the fence with some of the greatest people that nobody sees or recognizes for the important job they do to keep this world safe. If you love this podcast, hit the follow button, or better yet, share with your family, friends, or coworkers. In more than 28 years of corrections, I have used or supervised pepperball hundreds of times. Now, as a master instructor for pepperball, I teach others about the versatility and effectiveness of this pepperball system. From cell extractions to disturbances on the rec yard, pepperball is the first option in my correctional toolbox. One of the most dangerous times for officers is during cell extractions. Pepperball allows officers to respond with the lowest level of force and still be effective and ready if the situation escalates. The responding officer controls where the projectiles are aimed, how many projectiles are launched, and how rapidly they're deployed. This allows the response to be tailored to the moment. To learn more about Pepperball, go to www.pepperball.com or click the link below in the show's information guide. Pepperball is the safer option first. Hello, and welcome back to the Prison Officer Podcast. Today's guest is a longtime friend of mine and a former boss. We worked many years ago at the Ozark Correctional Center, and he's someone I respect, and I've been waiting to do this podcast for quite a while where I get to interview him. He's a retired major from the Missouri Department of Corrections, and his name is Paul Young. So welcome to the Prison Officer Podcast, Paul.
Glad to be here.
I have to kind of watch myself because I'm wanting to say major, so I'm going to do it a little bit more informal. I'm going to say Paul, but I called you major for a long time. So I like to start with all my guests. Tell me a little bit about where you grew up.
Well, I grew up in Seymour, Missouri, graduated in Seymour in 1956. From there, I went to work at Caterpillar Tractor Company in Peoria, Illinois, and was drafted by my friends and neighbors in Webster County, and went to the United States Army and went to Italy, and they decided to send me to Lebanon from Italy, and spent a couple of years over there. And
what years were that?
1957 and 58.
Okay.
In 1959, I was in the reserves. Was transferred back from Italy to the reserve, Army reserves, and completed my 8-year obligation. And from there, I joined the Springfield Police Department in January of 1960.
Tell me a little bit about that. What was it? What did it take back then to get on? What year would that have been when you got on?
In 1960?
Okay.
Well, just basically you had to graduate from high school, and if you kind of like the Army, if you could breathe good and get past the physical, that's about it.
Okay.
And I was one of the first dog handlers they had, and I worked mostly patrol South Springfield in the West End, driving districts until they took the dog, and then Jerry, a friend of mine, he had a dog, and we worked into our city. We responded to fights and break-ins. And in 1966, I resigned and went to work for the Missouri Department of Corrections, Missouri State Penitentiary for men.
Okay.
There was from 1966 to 1974, we were a satellite institution of MSP, like Church Farm, Men's Farm, and Algoa. We all worked for MSP, though.
Okay.
And we were assigned in 1974, line item budgeting put us away from MSP. So
you were assigned to MSP, but you worked part of the time or all of the time down here at Ozark Correctional Center?
Most of the time.
Most of the time.
But just about the time you think you're full-time at Fulton Honor Camp, which was Fulton Honor Camp then.
Sure.
They would say, hey, go back to MSP for a month.
Right. So what was it? What made you do the change from the police department to the Missouri Department of Corrections? Was it benefits or something, or
free housing?
Free housing.
$17 a month for housing.
No kidding. Okay.
The pay was very close to the same, but I got a free house plus they furnished the utilities, which made pretty good pay raise.
Right.
And
that was on the reservation here.
Yeah, at Fordham. And
was that housing there with the Air Force? Was it originally Air Force
it's
housing?
all Air Force.
Okay, so it came with the place.
Came with the place. The state of Missouri bought the Fordham Honor Camp from the federal government for $1. But they had to have, for 20 years, they had to provide education for inmates.
Mm-hmm.
And that was through vocational education, like, we had a upholstery shop, we had a school, and we had to have, the school was mandatory. The education part was mandatory.
Mm-hmm.
They could not have that place without the school. Plus, we had mechanic shop.
Uh-huh.
And that was how we started off with it. And I'd have to say it was very successful. We had a lot of escapes, and I'd done a lot of chasing convicts. Went to Florida 13 times to pick up convicts.
So, for those that don't know, where the Ozark Correctional Center sits now, that was originally a radar installation
U.S. Air Force.
For the Air Force.
Air Force.
And the two of those, I don't know about now, but when I worked there, still two of those buildings were the old radar towers.
Yeah, they're still there.
Are they still there?
Yeah.
Okay. So you came in as a CO1?
CO1.
When was your first chance to move up that ladder?
Well, it was a MSP controlled the promotions. Well, if there was a promotion at Portland, it always came from MSP. Donald Warwick was the first superintendent there, and he was a sergeant. That was my first boss.
Wow.
There were 7 employees. I was the 7th employee. For example, like 4th of July, I might be working that place by myself, and was.
Right.
I done the cooking, I done the supervising inmates, and I recall a fight. Had a fight there. That was Major Lewis had taken over then, and I made 2 inmates fight. And he told me the next day, he said, "Young, we don't do that." Said, "You had to lock them up." And I said, "How do you lock up 85 mad inmates?"
Right.
I'm by myself. I said, "They're going to fight." So I got them out there and made them fight. Fight was over, and that was the end of it.
Right.
And, he said, "Well, don't do that again."
Got it out of their system.
Yeah. Anyway, interesting. But I made sergeant been there about 8 or 10 years. At that time, there was a little conflict, and the chief of custody got transferred to Jefferson City. Mm-hmm. And I started in as chief of custody as a sergeant and stayed in the same chair for 21 years.
Wow.
And got promoted from right on up.
But still chief of custody all through those steps.
All through those steps. Worked for 21 different superintendents.
Wow.
And that is 21 different versions of how things need to be done. Everyone has their own approach in trying to readjust with each superintendent, survive.
So that's a great leadership talk there. So walk me through that a little bit. How did you navigate that?
Well, you have to be able to change.
Yeah.
I mean, from one day to the next.
That's something we're resistant to in corrections usually.
Very resistant.
Right.
But you learn, if I'm going to survive, I've got to change with it. This next guy is not going to see what I'm doing the same way I see it.
Right.
Plus, from 1974, the federal government stepped in, and we started recording all our handling of inmates. If you had to get rough with an inmate, you had to have videotape it, and you had to have people who supported you and around you when you had trouble. Mm-hmm. And I was very blessed.
Right. Well, and that's definitely a leadership topic there. You'll see leaders who get mad about the way things are, and I'm just going to do my own thing. Well, in prison, you can't just do your own thing. The team around you matters. And even if you don't agree with them, you still need to have those people in a position to where you can at least have a conversation. So
you never want to give an individual something to do that you wouldn't do.
Yeah.
Never.
Yeah.
And I found that worked real well for me.
Yeah.
If it needs to be done, I'd go out there and do it myself. Rather than sometimes I probably should have sent somebody. Nah.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things on my notes to talk about when we maybe later on, but we'll talk about it now. One of the things that I always admired about you as a supervisor is you led from the front. Um, there was nothing that you would have somebody do that you didn't go do. And a good example of that, how many years did you go to E Squad? Because every year E Squads across the state of Missouri go and they meet a physical challenge.
I was one of
You,
the beginners,
yeah.
and I ended still on the E Squad at 63 years old. Very difficult to pass that test, by the way, at 63.
But you were there with us every year.
Yeah,
Yeah, rode that bus to Jeff City, and yeah,
yeah, it was very difficult.
and that puts something in people's minds. That when you have a leader that's willing to do that, that lead from the front, that's very important. And I think people remember that. I know I did. I remembered it. So tell me about what were some of the major incidents that you had as you were doing some of that?
Well, first of all, in 1974, the law started changing. The federal government stepped in and said, you can't do this and you can't do that. You can't, for example, when I went to work there, if we put a man in an isolation cell, he got bread and water once a day.
Interesting.
No bed,
Right.
bread and water.
Wow.
The federal government stepped in. We hadn't been doing that for 2 or 3 years there, and they stepped in and said, you can't do that no longer. You've got to give them a bed. So we give them a 1-inch mattress.
Right.
And we give them bread and water twice a day.
Right.
And the federal government said, well, that's not good enough.
Mm-hmm.
You got to beat that. So really, the federal government changed every step through my entire career, right up to the day I left, in terms of what I could do and what I couldn't do.
Right.
We started videotaping everything we done. And was that good or bad? Yeah, I thought it was good. I didn't object to that.
Right.
I didn't believe in beating an inmate.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't believe an inmate beating me either.
That's true.
And I responded.
Yeah.
If it needed to be responded, I responded to it with more violence than they could offer.
Mm-hmm.
And I expected, as a correctional officer, when you lose that ability to not be able to respond with more violence than they offer, then you lost your way.
Right.
And I know a lot of people don't agree with that. And I seen things at the walls that I didn't agree with. I won't discuss, but
sure,
they're all dead now.
You're right. Yeah.
So it really wouldn't matter.
Yeah, and I think all of us have at some time in our career. Some of those changes were needed.
Oh, I agree.
But in some ways, we have went too far. I think a lot of the public doesn't understand that a lot of those inmates, from the time they were born, they grew up with violence. Violence is what they understand. And I don't mean, like you said, I don't need to go take a stick and just beat somebody for no reason.
Right.
But once they come at you, you can't just pussyfoot around it. You're absolutely right. You got to go back at them with the same stuff that they brought to you.
I think you'll survive that way. Well, I know you will. I did.
You did.
Anyway, starting from 1974 was a crucial time. We had a director came in from New York, and the first thing he done was cut all the handles out, hose and garden equipment at Rents Farm, and sold all the mules too.
Right.
And said, well, we're not going to make no more gardens, and we're not going to farm. And that took a lot of change at MSP. It was very difficult for those folks to change with that style. And then from then on, it was just one change after another in a different direction. You had to be able to change with that. And it was, I always used, we had training in Jeff City, and this was always a good one. We all went up there. We was all majors at the time, and we all had on Polish car. We had this guy out of Lincoln University as an instructor,
Mm-hmm.
and his thing was all Polish. He never really catch on what was going on.
But you,
We had a good laugh.
right,
But
right.
anyway, we got away with it. But a lot of things happen. A lot of humor in prison, and you gotta see the funny things, or you don't ever make it.
Absolutely. Um, Now, when he came in, when the new director came in, and he took away a lot of the ability to work the inmates, because when we took away the farms, a lot of the inmates weren't working anymore, especially at your penitentiaries and your higher security institutions. But one of the things that I always admired and liked working around at OCC was the fact that it was a working camp. You guys had a fire department there for many years,
Oh,
highway crew goes out and cleans up the highways. And then they've had work release there for a long time. What was it like supervising some of that, and how did you feel about that? Those,
well, I thought it was ideal.
yeah,
It was a, it was a, it gave the inmate work experience,
mm-hmm,
and some of them had never cut a sprout. Some of them had never picked up trash, and overall, I thought it was
right,
excellent. Did they abuse it? Yeah, some of them did, but very few.
right,
We had the answer for that, and the learning phase of that was a lot better than the down part of it.
sure, sure,
And I thought it was excellent, and I think that's part of how I survived by going along with what they had planned through and that's when the drug treatment program come along. It totally changed again
yeah,
because then instead of labor, and we still had the labor with the drug treatment program, but it was mostly training
yeah,
then with the drug treatment program.
yeah.
And I agreed with 98% of the drug treatment program. If I hadn't have, Jordan Lombardi had sent me to Egypt.
Sure.
But I did agree with it, though,
Yeah.
and got along great with those people.
I mean, you're like me. I worked at the Walls. I worked at OCC, and I really got to see inmates who had opportunity at Ozark Correctional Center. And I saw inmates take advantage of some of that, and I didn't think they would come back. I mean, they actually seemed like they'd changed. And you don't see that a lot in, your maximum security
Oh,
prisons.
no.
Yeah. So I always thought that was good programs. I think we need more of that in this country. Inmates working is always a good thing.
I agree.
But um, well, I know something that's near and dear to your heart, and you mentioned a little bit that you started off with as a dog handler there in Springfield, but we also had one hell of a dog team here at Ozark Correctional Center that I was proud to be part of, but I believe you started that, correct?
Right. Yeah, we had bloodhounds from just about the beginning. Our dogs first originally came out of Algoa,
Okay.
and we got a couple of dogs from them, but then we started getting our own dogs.
Mm-hmm.
I got some of them, well, the dog you got, I think I got it out of Arkansas,
Right.
the Department of Corrections in Arkansas, and we had some really good dogs, and then we had some that wasn't so good. So uh, the manhunt, I remember one of the better ones is Joe Owens and I was down at Taney County Jail. Well, he's trailing a guy out of the Taney County Jail,
Mm-hmm.
and a deer goes across in front of us. The dog I had took out right after the deer.
Right.
Well, I thumped that dog's head, and we had to get rid of that dog. That thing turned mean.
Oh.
I couldn't even look it in the eye and bite me.
Oh, wow.
So we sent it back to Algoa. But yeah, there's a lot of different experiences with them dogs.
Mm-hmm.
Some good and some really bad. But
Right. Yeah, I was coon hunting one night and called a dog back to me, and the dog didn't see the bluff. I was standing at the bottom of the creek, and that dog did, just a cartoon Wile E. Coyote off there, and then hit the creek and looked up at me and never would deal with me again. She thought I'd done that on purpose. They get something in their head, and
yeah,
they're done. We mentioned a little bit about escapes, and of course, one of the bigger escapes, or one of the biggest manhunts in Missouri, was John David Brown. And you guys were right in the middle of that, weren't you?
Well, I spent probably 45 days chasing Brown.
Wow.
Total, which we chased him at Camdenton first.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we chased him at OCC when he first escaped, but then he was spotted in Camdenton, Missouri, and we were up there for about 2 weeks chasing him.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy was good. He knew he had to get away from us.
Yeah. Start me for the people that don't know that manhunt. Now, he was at Ozark Correctional Center. Tell me about the story there. He escaped, and then how we led to that big manhunt.
Well, he first escaped the Ozark Correctional Center, and he rode out from rode out through the front gate underneath a vehicle.
Huh?
And that's how he first escaped. And we at that time we had the old gate. We didn't have the new gate they got now.
Right.
And they didn't check the vehicle good enough, and they didn't get away. Well, we started chasing him then, thinking he was in our area, which he what he went to Buffalo.
Mm-hmm.
And then Joe Owens and I went to Buffalo and chased him for a day or two. And the next manhunt we was on with him was he started robbing places in Lake Ozarks.
Mm-hmm.
He'd rob a place and run off behind down in them deep valleys, and they couldn't catch him.
Right. Now, he was kind of a survivalist, right? Wasn't it the Covenant, the Sword, and the Arm of the Lord? Seems like that was the name of the survivalist group he was part of. I think that was in Arkansas or Southern Missouri.
No, that was the guy that killed the trooper. That wasn't Brown.
That was Glenn Paul Sweet.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll go ahead with the story about Brown. Okay.
Brown was he was just an old kid out of Buffalo that was just slick, fast. He knew how to run from law.
Right.
Well, we chased him up there at Camden for a week or two and got close to him.
Mm-hmm.
But the next time they called us, it was about a month later. They called us out of Rolla.
Mm-hmm.
He was at a motel, and he come out on the upper deck of that motel, and a police officer seen him up there, and he shot that police officer. Or shot at him.
Right.
And I think he hit him.
He wounded him, I think. Yeah.
I think he wounded him. And then we got to chasing him up there. And at Doolittle, he killed a guy in a church over a cleaning church here in Doolittle. He shot him in the back of the head because he wouldn't give him his car keys.
Oh, wow.
And that's when manhunt started big time. We had everybody from the National Guard we was all up there for about a month chasing that guy.
Yeah.
And eventually they caught him in Oklahoma. But on these manhunts, especially with these dogs, people will call you and say, go to Highway Patrol named it, go to a certain place and check this out. They seen him.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't see him. They got scared, thought it was him. And you had to go and chase him. Nothing.
Looking at the shadows.
Looking at shadows.
Yeah.
And we chased a lot of shadows up there, and we chased him. We got real close to him a couple of times.
Right.
And finally, he's doing life sentence where he needs to be.
Sure. Any other ones that, you just recollect as memorable? Because I know you guys were on, I don't even know how many, dozens.
No, well, that and the one down Taney County where they killed a trooper, that was the two big ones. And we done good in both places. Highway Patrol took real good care of us down there. They got us vests and lights and things that we didn't have.
Right.
That was Major Fisher. Never forget him.
Right. Just for taking care of his people.
Yeah, take care of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because a lot of people don't realize, and, I was on that team for 6+ years. And Josh Carlisle, remember the little autistic boy that you guys sent us on down there? I think that was Taney County also. And then, Joe Johns, and that was up north. He killed the old man and then went to Joplin and killed a woman. But walking through the woods with your hand one hand on a dog, lead while they're pulling you through there in the middle of the dark, and you're just hoping the other guy hasn't stolen a pistol or something, because they're going to see you coming before you ever get there or hear you. It's a little nerve-wracking.
Oh, we had, for example, we was looking for this guy that killed the trooper down there. Captain Owens and I was bridge right across from Bass Pro Shop down there at Ransom Landing. There's a bridge right across the lake there.
Right.
We come out from under that bridge down there looking for this guy, and the Highway Patrol had one of them helicopters up. One of them Army helicopters come right up over that bridge, and we was coming out from under that bridge. Things got real tight there.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow.
And we knew this guy had a 357 Magnum. He'd got that. We found him up at Lake the Ozarks. We knew he had that gun with him. We knew he'd target practiced up there. Yeah, we got some real encounters. When you're holding on to a dog and a shotgun,
yeah,
you got to hold that shotgun so tight that you can't make it work.
Right. Yeah.
Things are pretty tight.
Oh, absolutely. Wow. Yeah, and that was Glenn Paul Sweet down there in Taney County, and he had some skills because he hadn't he cached like weapons and food and stuff out in the woods.
They said he did, but they said he was whatever. What did you see? He belonged to this group of people.
Yeah, the Covenant, the Sword, and the Armor of the Lord, I think.
He came out of Idaho.
Okay.
Me and Colonel Fisher and someone else with Highway Patrol was in that park down there at Forsyth. And I told the colonel, I said, we got enough people here. If we line everybody up, he was like, we knew what direction he was.
Right.
I said, if we line everybody up 4 feet apart, we're going to find this guy.
Right.
We did. First thing we found was where he camped at, and all he had was toilet paper and a gun.
Right.
And he'd left it behind. And the next day, we done the same thing the next day, and they caught him down there in the park.
Yeah.
But he wasn't nothing what he was nowhere near the character that
the news media made him to be.
The news media made him to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. They had him coming out of Idaho with all this crazy stuff. Nah.
Right. Just a criminal.
Just a criminal.
Yeah.
Trooper lost his life over something that was totally insane. It was a shame, really.
Right. Right. So, such a long career. What was some highlights? I know you won. You got employee of the state for the Missouri Department of Corrections.
State.
Yeah.
I don't know, either someone was a good rider or I was a good employee. I don't know which it was. But, it was part of the manhunt. We was on the manhunt so long, and then part of the accumulation of just sick leave and being there.
Right.
One of the things whenever I lived there, if I was out in my backyard and trouble at the prison, I knew it. I didn't have to go up there. They didn't have to call me.
Right.
But you can ask her. Many a time I got up at my breakfast table and went and broke a fight up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Come back and said, look at you.
Yeah.
Now we can't go nowhere. You're all dirty. I said, well, the guys needed help.
Right. So was that, you lived there on the reservation most of your career.
34 years.
34 years.
I lived off of it maybe a year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So was that tough to never be able to get away from work, or is it just part of what you did?
Well, I think you just get used to it,
Yeah.
It's part of the job. And I was required to live there. I didn't have a choice. First of all, when I got promoted sergeant, that was the end of it. You had to live there. And you just accepted that fact.
Yeah.
That's part of it.
You don't see that anymore, and I think, and OCC wasn't the only place. Lots of places had reservation housing, and upper staff, they stayed there. They were available there, and I think it'd be hard to get employees to do that these days.
Couldn't do it.
Yeah, yeah, and that's too bad because it was positive for the institution. It did how do I want to put that? There was always somebody there, always somebody to respond. And I think there was some positives to that. But
Well, we never had enough help.
yeah,
That's what our problem was. That maybe with 178 to 200 inmates, I don't have two people there,
wow.
and maybe one in food service and two other people
Mm-hmm.
working a weekend.
Yeah,
Well, it's hard for two guys to watch 178 men and not have trouble.
right.
They're going to be trouble somewhere.
Yeah.
And a majority of them over the years, I had good help.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's got their own opinion, and when you're dealing with people with different opinion on how things should be done, I know a lot of guys didn't agree with me, and I didn't agree with them. But you're going to have that in any given, especially in a prison situation, because normally when a guy goes to work in a prison and or a gal, and they come in and they said right off the jump, well, things are not good here.
Mm-hmm.
Of course they're not good. It's a prison. But if you let that eat at you personally,
Yeah.
instead of trying to make a positive thing out of being there, then you're going to have a very unpositive attitude your entire career.
Yeah.
And it's best that you went home right then instead of staying in corrections, because no, nothing ever good there. It's going to be bad.
Right. It's something I've talked about on this podcast before because I went through that myself, and I caught myself getting so angry and getting so upset with how things weren't working and this and that it took me several years. And this is actually when I went into the federal system, and it took me several years to get a hold of that and to realize that I was the one causing myself to be unhappy at work. Not that bad things don't happen. Bad things happen every day. But absolutely, your attitude.
Yeah, first thing you got to do is like what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And very few, probably of all the people I interviewed and hard and fired, I only had probably one or two come up to me and say, "Hey, this is not for me. I'm going to the front gate, and I'll see you somewhere else."
Yeah.
And I did have people say, and I appreciated that because, hey, they're on. This guy's on.
Mm-hmm.
He said, "This is just not for me."
Sure.
Yeah. And you don't see that very often. Yeah. Usually a guy hang around, and when maybe he should have went home years ago.
Yeah.
And it becomes an atmosphere malcontent sometimes because you didn't harm my brother, or you fired my brother,
right?
Or my brother should have got the promotion. And when you deal with that for so many years, people love to talk, and they love to talk in prison because that's all they got to do.
Sure.
And they tell stories that are just unreal sometimes. And you got to understand that that's going to happen to you if you're making decisions.
Yep.
Or if someone's seen you handle an inmate that he thought or she thought that was not the right way. So he called his legislator, or she called his legislator, and they call you. And a good example of that, one night, had a black kid there. He's about 18, 19 years old. He had made a weapon out of a broom handle, drove nails to it, a medieval weapon, and he was attacking an officer. They called me up there, and I locked him up. And locked him up, never thought nothing about it, went home. And next morning, get up, go to work. FBI is there at the front gate. They come often after 74, and I said, well, who do you want to see? He said, we want to see Paul Young. You want to see me?
Right.
Okay. I said, okay, what do you need? He said, well, this black guy calls his mother last night in Kansas City. Well, after I left, the officer let him make a phone call. He calls his mother in Kansas City, tells his mother how I beat him and shut his hands in the desk drawers, trying to get a confession out of him. Hey, well, I said, come on in. And took him up to the office. I got that guy out of the cell and took him back there and strip searched down. I said, now look at this guy. Do you see any marks on this guy? Boy, that FBI didn't eat that guy up alive now. he told him how it was
Yeah,
because he told his mother the biggest lies that ever was about how I beat him and stuff. And usually stuff like that worked out in your benefit,
sure.
and it did in that case for me.
Yeah,
But you never know.
right.
You know, it's just unbelievable at what lengths some folks will go to get even with you
Mm-hmm.
or to because of their own. Hey, I'm mad at myself.
Right.
Yeah.
Um, a story I remember where we interacted, and I won't name his name, but there was an officer who worked the front gate for a long time at OCC. And of course, I'd came down from Jeff City and usually went to midnights right away. And so I'm on midnights. This officer's working the front gate on midnights, and uh, shift request came out. And back then, you could bid on going to a different shift. I said, "Well, I'd only been there 6 months." I said, well, "I think I'm going to put in for that." This guy said, "No, they'll never give it to you." I said, "Why?" He said, "You're on midnights. They don't like people on midnights." He said, "I've been here for 10 years. They won't let me off midnights." And so I kind of put that in the back of my head, but I went ahead and filled it out and, stuck it in. I'll see what'll happen. And sure enough, 6 months, boom, I'm on days. And I remember asking you, I said, "How come you guys won't let him off midnights?" And you said, "He put in for it once 10 years ago, got mad, and has never put in for it again." And that's kind of what you're talking about with having that long supervision there, where you were a supervisor for almost the entire period of your tenure there. And so, and this is a smaller community here.
Well, in the process of it, you make a lot of enemies, and
Yeah.
you make a lot of friends. But uh, it's funny how some folks, I got on call her name's a good friend of mine. One of them did now. They wanted their son-in-law to go to work there.
Mm-hmm.
They sent him up for a job interview. Hey, the guy didn't want to work there. He did not want to work there. You
Right.
could tell this guy didn't want nothing to do with no convict. He didn't say that,
Yeah.
but he might as well told me that.
Sure.
And so I interviewed him. I seen this. He's no good for this. So I didn't even let on like I was going to try to hire him. And he left. And of course, who did blame? Blamed me.
Like you.
But anyway, I have got a story about hiring people.
Okay.
I went to Jeff City to hire. There's three of them. And this is another thing after 1974. We started hiring as a team in Jeff City. There'd be usually two females
Mm-hmm.
and a male major, and we'd hire. Well, we had this guy come in from Dixon, Missouri, and he had bloodshot eyes, and you could tell he had a hangover. And he said, "I'm going to go to work at MSP." I said, "You did?" I said, "You ever work over?" "Oh yeah." He said, "I worked over in B basement." Well, I worked there too. I'd B basement death row.
Right.
And I said, "Well, you like it?" He said, "Oh yeah, I like it." I said, "Well, was you a good employee?" "Yeah, he was a good employee." I said, "Well," he didn't know Major Everly's in the next room.
Mm-hmm.
So I looked at the paperwork, and these gals are looking at me like we ain't gonna hire this guy
Right.
because things are changing. See, he said, "Well, I've got one little problem." Said, "I got a DWI pending over at Dixon." I said, "Well, how long did you work at MSP?" He said, 7 years. I said, "I worked over there all the time in the basement."
Mm-hmm.
Well, I said, I knew right then this guy's a good employee. And I said, "Well," he said, "I got 7 kids." And I tried. I said, "Well," I looked at these gals. I said, "I don't, this guy's got DWI." I said, "I'm going to go check." I just stepped around the next room, and I think it's Major Everly there.
Yeah.
And I said, "See this guy?" I said, "He's wanting a job, the MSP." I said, "You know him?" "Oh, yeah, it's a good hand." I said, "All right." I said, "Well, he's got a DWI pending over at Dixon." He said, "Well, hell, everybody over at Dixon's got a DWI pending." All right.
Right.
Went back in there and I said, "You're hard." Well,
Right.
I got some mean looks, but
Yeah.
they already got it. But anyway, I guess he just had a little hard luck and they really recommended him.
Yeah. Well, that
And he went
happens
back to work.
sometimes. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Major Everly he was a long time major at Missouri State Penn.
Yeah, long time.
Yeah. So we've kind of covered the some of the leadership stuff I was going to ask. So I know you've hired a bunch of people, you've trained a bunch of rookies. I think these days it's almost a whole different thought process with the rookies that are coming in to prison. I don't think they look at it the same way we did, as a service, as a duty. What's some of the advice that you would give an officer going into corrections these days?
Well, I think you had the right idea. It's, first of all, you got to get past this is a bad place and I'm part of the bad.
Mm.
This, that's the first thing. If you ever get past that and focus on day-to-day happenings in the prison,
Mm-hmm.
and be alert at all times, and you're going to survive and you're going to have a good job.
Right.
And I've made a lot more money since I retired than I did when I went to work.
Right.
I went to work for $260 a month, 6 days a week.
Wow.
But if you stay long enough and stay with it, I think it's a real job. And I think that a lot of people have a total misconception of what they're looking at when they look at a prison job.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, they're afraid. And if you're afraid, get out that day, first day.
Yeah.
Can't work there if you're afraid.
And you can't hide it.
No, and you can't hide it.
Yeah.
And it's going to come out probably the first day you're there.
Right. Right.
If you're afraid. One time the guy asked me, he said, was you ever afraid at MSP when you worked up there? No, I wasn't afraid. I was scared literally to death at times.
Yeah.
And if you find someone that tells you they was never afraid up there, found you the biggest liar that ever was.
Yeah. Yeah.
But no, there's going to be days like that, and you're going to see some violence that don't happen anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just part of the going through the gate.
Sure.
Well, one of the biggest, for a new employee, one of the biggest obstacles when he first goes to work is getting through the round gate, as they call the round gate at MSP.
Right.
You get through the round gate, that's your big one.
Right.
The rest of the day is downhill.
Literally sometimes, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. So what are you doing now? How long have you been retired now?
23 years.
Retired 23 years. Wow. And you said you've been doing well with that. What are you doing now? Just
riding horses and minding Bonnie.
Yeah.
She's your boss.
You still got dogs, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Bird dog. It's over I got a bird dog. It's over at my boy's house. Bad weather. I don't have no heat in my dog house.
Okay.
He's got a garage, and he puts our dogs in the garage over there.
Well, I thank you. I appreciate it. And great interview. I know there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be interested in hearing your stories. So thanks for coming on here, Paul.
Oh, you're welcome anytime.
If you enjoy these podcasts, the best way to support the Prisoner Officer Podcast is to share these episodes with your friends or family on social media. Let me invite you to visit www.theprisonofficer.com. If you haven't already, check out the Prison Officer Podcast on Facebook and click that little follow button. Or leave us a message, or better yet, leave us a review. And if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, Google, or Spotify, please click the subscribe button. Till next time, I'm Mike Cantrell. Watch your back, and please take care of each other out there behind those walls.